Some of us who are privileged by God to understand and have light in some areas, I believe that it is our duty to present some information on permanent platforms like this so that other people may stumble upon it someday and read it. And I believe that someone like me can be in a position of authority whereby some of these historical mess can be corrected, or people who hear from seeing things like this can be inspired and ensure that such things have been corrected. You see, until you dig into knowledge, as a Christian, there is this part of the Bible that says, I, Daniel, understood by books. I understood by knowledge. Previously, yes, a great reason for why our continent, Africa, and Nigeria as a case study is where it is today is because of the foolishness of our leaders. But then, our leaders are not really the foundation of why Africa is where it is today. I understood by books and by knowledge that Africa is where it is today because the people that colonized Africa, after Africans started rising and started agitating that they can take care of themselves, these people claim to have handed over independence to Africa, but then refused to hand over independence in Africa. They only did textbook handover, but there was no practical handover. Even when they seem to have left African countries or nations, I'm talking about Britain and France, they far away in their country still did things to pull the strings and try to steal our resources through puppets. Any African leader that rises up to stand against such continued colonization is assassinated or killed or overthrown or pushed aside by the same people that said they gave us independence. I'm shocked at the number of African leaders, charismatic African leaders, that were assassinated by the French, especially the French, assassinated by the French. When any African leader stands up and tries to do the right things for his people and stand against colonial practices, before you know it, the French will mobilize in one way or the other and have that person assassinated and killed. So that brings me to the question, why is it that the French are still having freedom to move in Africa today? Why is it that the French are still moving around today? Why is it that the French are still having say in one way of Africa today? Because of the evil deeds of the French in Africa, they should be made persona non grata. The French have no say in Africa. The French should be begging to even have a second of presence in Africa, because the French have a lot to pay for African leaders that they murdered and assassinated. And with the British, with the help of the British and the likes of the Belgians, these people should be made persona non grata in Africa. But because Africans do not know the history of what these people have done to their ancestors, of what these people have done to undermine that political, socio-economic development, Africans are still embracing these white people as people that they feel that will leverage for their success, not knowing that the fact that their continent have been so underdeveloped, the fact that opportunities have been denied them in millions, if not in billions, is because of these same people that they are placing so much relevance and significance on. You see, an average African gives so much respect to white man. The white man meaning the British and the French. Well, not knowing that the British and the French are the major reason, the foundational reason why Africa is where it is today. So, I believe that every African should really go and make research. Who killed Thomas Sankara? Who killed Gaddafi? Who killed? There are so many of them. Go and do your research. You will see that the British and the French are actually responsible for where Africa is today. And the British and the French should be made persona non grata. They should have no say in Africa. These people should beg to even have a second presence in Africa. So Africans It's high time you guys emancipate yourself from mental slavery. I believe that the kind of slavery that is occurring in Africa today is worse than what it was even in the time of the slave trade, when people were being tied up in their legs with chains. Yes, that is not probably what we want right now. But then, what is worse than when a man decides to put the chains upon himself by himself without an external influence or factor? Africans have decided to put upon themselves the chains on their necks and their legs and refuse to move forward. Africans have put upon themselves chain of ignorance, chain of darkness, chain of lack of knowledge, chain of lack of critical thinking, chain of tribalism, chain of bigotry. If Africans can conscientiously begin to go for information, begin to know the history of their continent, know the history of how the French and the British have directly or indirectly undermined their growth for the past 1 century, Africans will come to understand that their problem is not underdevelopment. Their problem is Western colonization, continued colonization, using ignoramuses as puppets to keep them down. Africans will begin to understand that there is a way to circumvent this entire people. So I want to ask, is it only Africa that was colonized by the British? The British colonized China using Hong Kong. But what is happening today? The Chinese kicked out the British out of China, and Hong Kong is even more prosperous than Britain today. It's really Africa that was colonized by the British. Apart from China, India was also colonized by the British. But what happened? India kicked out everything about the British, and today India is even far ahead of Britain in many ways. So colonization of Africa is one thing, and Africans allowing the British and the French to continue to colonize them even till today. This is 2024. If you look at what's happening in Africa, you see that the British and the French are still heavily present in the continued colonization of Africa. So now I'm a Nigerian. I'm speaking to my Nigerian populace. The youth of Nigeria should emancipate yourself from mental tribal slavery. Go for knowledge. An average Nigerian youth, an average Nigerian student would spend hours on things that are meaningless, but would not be able to read one book, even in 1 decade. Tell me, how can you know how to face your oppressors? How can you know how to face both your internal and external oppressors when you have rejected knowledge? I want to conclude by saying this. Because Africans have rejected knowledge, their oppressors have refused to leave them, because you need knowledge to know that you are being oppressed. A man that is ignorant of his being oppressed will end up being an embracer of his oppressors. So emancipate yourself from mental slavery. Go for knowledge so that your eyes will open, so you know where your problem is starting from. Thank you.